Hey Mike, how you doing?
Hey, Steve. Pretty well. How about yourself?
Pretty good. Slow start today.
Yeah, pretty sure that Keela had something interesting to share today. Um, some of us are double booked, so not certain what's going to happen.
I'll chat her and just see if she's planning on this meeting.
There she is.
Okay, I won't. Hey Keela,
Hi,
how are you doing?
I'm okay. How's it going? Sorry, I'm a few minutes late.
No problem.
I've just been dealing with a slight emergency, so give me a second, get what we need up and open, and we will go through our agenda.
Sounds good.
It also gives people another minute to join. How are you, Mike?
Hey, pretty good. How about yourself?
Pretty good too. So we have the plan for today is to go through the workflows, which I had staff draft and have not reviewed, so we'll get to review them together. Let me just get our notes going and we will get through our official kickoff. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Alrighty, so good day to wherever you are, whatever time zone you're in. Welcome to today's edition of the Cardea working group. What before we jump into our agenda, what we need to just go through is some of our housekeeping items. So just a quick reminder that we're governed by the Hyperledger antitrust policy and the as well as the Hyperledger code of conduct. So that generally in summation is we're not going for both of them is we're not going to talk about explicit business opportunities here. And we're also encouraging everybody to have a voice and to be able to participate. If anybody has issues with either of those, then there are links in our meeting notes and on the Hyperledger website to be able to raise a concern. Obviously, as chair or co-chair, you can also reach out to myself or Ken, who's not with us at the moment, to go through that. So today we are going to jump into some workflows that we have drafted. And before I do that, let me see if anybody wants to say hello. I know we're a small group today. Would anybody like to say hi? Introduce themselves? Okay. Okay, let me get these workflows up and we will jump through. So just as a reminder, and I'm going to do my best to talk and pull this up at the same time, we have been evaluating the scenario where verifiable credentials could be used to help manage the patient identity challenges that exist at healthcare with healthcare interactions and in the healthcare workspace. So we have walked through those in terms of what we think those handshakes are and handoffs and interactions. And we had done that sort of in a verbal discussion. We've now drafted some visuals to go with it. So I had a new staff person do that as a fun learning exercise for them too. Um, And so the goal of this is to get those interactions to be really clear and well documented, and then to expand or potentially rewrite our previous white paper to transition to this kind of exchange and model. So that's sort of the summation and the goal of trying to get these things documented, and for us to review them, make modifications as we see fit, and make these workflows into something that we can, potentially just redistribute and use in the white paper. So give me 2 seconds and I will share said workflow, and we will navigate through each one of these handoffs. I just need to fix one thing, and I will share my screen. In Slide Master. Okay. Great. Oh, that didn't quite work. Okay. Wonderful. So we have previously, let me share my screen. And this is maybe going to be a little small because I'm on my big monitor. Just let me know if we have any, if it's challenging to read. I can also zoom in. I do think we're going to edit as we go. So I probably want to keep it in like this view, not the presenter mode. Is that too small for you guys to see?
Looks okay to me.
That looks
Okay.
good.
Okay, if anybody needs me to zoom in, let me know and I will. So we've outlined a couple of we call these workflows, data flows, interaction flows, and we are starting with the new patient creation. And perhaps what I can do is also just pull up our write-up of these. Let me move this over, which is in some previous notes we had taken. So we have that, and we'll need to draw who's who here because it looks like that's missing. But what we have is that the patient practice, this scenario is the new patient creation. This in theory is where a verifiable credential would be created for the identity of that patient. And just as a reminder, at the 30,000-foot view, what we're hoping to accomplish is to remove the barriers around the patient identity and patient information exchanges that are happening in the healthcare space, right? So you walk into the doctor's office, you walk to the front desk and they say name and date of birth, and you have to like blurt it out in front of everybody in the waiting room, your identifiable information. And so and you may have to give them more information. They're going to ask you to update, is this still your address? Is this still all this stuff? And you're going to go through that whole song and dance kind of every time you go to the doctor's office. And if it's your first time there, they're going to collect a lot of information that you've already maybe given somebody else, or even that same institution, you've already given it to them, and you're just having to redo it because they just do that every time. And so there's got to be a better way. So we've started to look at the credentials for this. So if we step through this, and let me get the written scenarios up just so that I can reference them with you all. Give me 2 seconds. Because we had taken the time to just like kind of word describe them. And they are here. Okay. Fantastic. So, sorry for my scrolling. All right, here we go. So our initial patient workflow was that the minimum placeholder record would be created when a patient calls in by phone or web, right? Like, hey, I need to come see the doctor. Great. What's your name and date of birth? Maybe your insurance information, like a placeholder, because you're not going to give them everything and answer the whole patient questionnaire while you're scheduling that appointment, right? And in theory, we could potentially issue a minimal credential at that point, just as a sort of placeholder credential. But maybe that's not possible. Then we would say you present at the doctor's office for as a new patient, and you would complete the patient information. Sometimes they're going to send you a link and say, check in before you arrive. So you could do that remotely, or you're going to do that in the office. You know, they're going to hand you the proverbial clipboard and say, fill out these forms. Um, we've also talked about at that point needing to capture some biometric, in theory, an image, right, of the patient so that we can have some identity binding to that credential. Their health insurance and health history might be collected. And then, of course, they would issue the patient a credential that they can then carry with them through that life cycle with that clinical practice and maybe with the network, the larger network. Any questions on the written write-up of that before we jump over to the workflow? Okay, we're going to see. I didn't have time to review these in advance, so we're going to see how they turned out. Okay, so the EMR, they received the appointment request, and I'm just getting rid of system here. They received the appointment request, and there's a question about, is it an existing patient? Yes or no? And the answer is, if it's not an existing patient, right, that's where we're going to say, okay, we collect the basic information. We're going to create the appointment, and potentially, I'm going to just put this in red, maybe with an initial credential. That's a sort of maybe statement there. Then how they're going to collect the rest of the demographic information that we just stepped through, right? Maybe they're going to be in the office with paper forms. And so then the patient would present that in, interesting. So the patient would get the information, would be asked to provide more information. In this case, this is assuming that we have an initial credential, so the patient would present that credential before getting the paperwork to complete their registration for that visit. I think that makes sense, and I'm curious if anybody has thoughts on that. So assuming, and maybe what I'll do is just kind of highlight all of these in red because they're on the assumption that the patient is getting an initial credential. I don't have pink. We'll go with orange. Those are an assumption of this step. So they would, and I'm not sure that that's necessary, especially in the paper presentation. However, on the electronic completion of the check-in process, it may make sense to use that initial sort of placeholder credential, because then we know they're updating the chart that was built as the placeholder for that patient when they called and scheduled their appointment. So this path, I think, does make a little bit of sense. And the language will need to get cleaned up. On the system doesn't scan it, but the user probably scans a link that brings up the check-in forms. Right, Mike, do you agree? Sorry, to pick on you. But most
You
likely
could probably, the one that says system scans credential, you could probably just eliminate the whole box, because patient presents credential to web kind of encapsulates the process of connecting and presenting.
Thanks. Yeah, I thought that might, I don't know, what is this big box here? Whoa, she grouped. No. Hold on. Okay, that's better. Yes, I thought maybe that we could narrow that down to one. So it's patient presents credential to web UI to pull up check-in form. And it's really that that's the glossing over of that step, but that's okay. Okay, then do patient and credential match. Do we need to say that?
So I don't know what you would be
That would have
comparing the
happened.
credential against.
Yeah.
I think that the credential would be used to pull up the proper form, and whatever you issued for the initial like appointment scheduling credential or whatever, It's likely that would be perhaps based on like a patient ID that is used when you present the credential to pull up the right chart, you know?
Yeah. And this one's interesting. This has that, like if you're in an electronic thing, that the patient could uh upload a picture, a selfie or a picture to do that identity binding. Are there opinions about a self-provided picture versus the agency taking the picture on their terms?
Yeah, I think that's a security problem. I think that
Yeah, I kind of,
you have no
because somebody
idea,
would need to say yes
right?
the first time.
There are two ways around this. One would be, like you said, have someone who actually works with the medical department to uh, see them in person and take the picture. That's one way to do it. The other one is to, at some point in the future, there may be a way to work with a government ID credential, such as a passport or more importantly, a driver's license, at least in the US, to say, this is an ID where a trusted agency took the picture of the person, while they were standing there in person, and then issued an ID that we can verify. So if they can share that ID, then you could do a comparison with a camera or something like that on the device, and it'd be trustworthy there. But until those credentials become available, you probably have to have someone do it in person.
I will clean that up a little bit. Okay, so there's clearly some things here that we'll adjust, but just to get the general flow here. So, okay, they're using a device to finish their check-in. They would potentially use their temporary, like, placeholder credential to pull up the chart that was made as the placeholder for them. They'd fill out the rest of their information. The practice would then do that identity verification and photo binding step, which I lumped into one step, and I think that's more than one. And then that system would then be able to issue a new complete credential with identity binding because they've taken the picture. Any other checks on that one?
And that would work pretty well because you'd have the connection that they used to present the initial credential and fill out all the information. That connection should still be active. And so the system should be able to just say, the person who filled out this form, we now have a picture. And since we have the picture, issue them their full identity credential.
Yeah, and it would probably be a revoke an issue, right? Because they had a placeholder one.
I don't know if you would have to revoke the placeholder one unless it's using the same schema, but
Yeah, TBD. Okay, so that's
yeah.
a question. Let me just start some notes over here so we can make sure we address these in the future. Is placeholder cred revoked, revoked, and replaced, or add on? Basically, is what you're saying, right? That one just kind of becomes useless and over on the side.
You could have one schema for initial and a different schema for full, or you could use the same schema and have partial information and then revoke the partial one. Either way.
Okay, we'll come back to ironing out that one. Okay, great. In the scenario where there is paper check-in procedures involved, then the patient would be given the forms, then filled out. The front desk staff would do the identity binding. I'll just make a note. Identity proof. They have to check. And they would transpose the paper forms into their chart and issue the credential. Your point here is that depending on whether or not they have a placeholder credential or not, there's going to be a scan step in there. right? To build the connection for them to issue this credential.
Yeah, if they scan a placeholder at the beginning, then they'll have an available connection to issue the credential to. And if they don't have an initial credential, but you're able to build the full thing in the office, then you'd have to connect before you issue the credential. The logic for that is pretty simple, though. Basically, the system could say, do we have a connection? If not, display a QR code. And if so, then just skip right to the issuance step.
Okay, excellent. I'm just gonna stick this here. We'll clean these up without dragging you all through that. Hey, Trevor, how's it going? Alrighty. So that's our first one. Any comments, other corrections, other concerns that we should either put in a parking lot to visit or discuss now?
The do patient and credential match bit. Do we need that piece there? The orange rhombus or
Oh,
diamond?
I actually think those are gonna go away. I painted them, but yeah, I think because this is that initial placeholder cred. There's no way to know. It's not binded.
Hmm.
Right? They scheduled an appointment and they said, okay, great. Well, here's, I don't know if on the scheduling of the appointment they would issue that placeholder credential. I think that's a big question mark. And so maybe they don't even have that initial credential. Maybe they're only going to get the credential after they've finished their full check-in procedure. Because if they call on the phone, like how are you sending them? You'd send them an email, I guess. But what if you got their email wrong because you typed it wrong, over the phone? Or you could text them something, I guess, if they had a cell phone that was a smartphone.
Yeah, I think an initial placeholder credential might not be useful. Interesting.
Yeah. I think it comes with challenges for sure. So that's why I kind of painted those orange because I'm not so sure about those steps. We might want to pull them out or put them on the side and say, you could do this, but it's maybe not worth it." The benefit in theory would be that you built a placeholder record that now it's not going to get orphaned. You're going to pull up the one you started. You know what I mean?
Right. And if you have government ID that's verifiable, where you can, see, oh, a government agency issued this ID and we can match it with a camera remotely, then that initial placeholder credential would actually be useful because it would represent a patient that you've already bound to their identity. Um, and then you could build out the rest of the chart later. So if you have an ID or a way to bind the identity ahead of time, then that would be useful. And if you don't, then you're not really linking to anybody in particular until you've got a photo in person.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of like, here's the credential for this placeholder appointment.
Mhm.
Which again, they still might never show up for that appointment, in which case you don't care about it.
Yeah.
So I'm not convinced that placeholder, and I can go in here and kind of, so the red and this is unfortunately orange, not red, but um, I think those kind of come out and we go to this part. So
I think for
actually
the I
this
think for a
goes,
first swing at this, they would probably come out. And then when government ID and binding is available, then you could put them back in.
yeah, okay. I'll go ahead and do that one segundo. Okay, bye. Sorry. Okay, bye and bye. Any other commentary? on this one.
For future appointments or things like that, if they bring their credential back to present again later, would you need to assume that the wallet application has like a fingerprint or a face ID, a biometric binding, so that you know that the person you gave the credential to is the same one that's opening the application and presenting the credential later?
I think that the photo is actually part of the credential.
Well, what I'm saying is if you're doing a remote workflow, if they're not back in the office, then your system needs to know that the person who's using the credential is the same one as you issued the credential to, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so you would want to have that's just a note to add somewhere. The app is going to depend on a biometric binding that says this fingerprint or this face ID matches the person we gave it to, so that we know the person using the credential is the same one we took the picture of and issued it to.
Yeah, that goes, I think, to the telehealth workflow also, because that
Yep.
would be remotely, right?
Yep.
So this is really question slash comment. Um, yep, that's great. Need to discuss security slash identity restriction on Cred app. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
Wallet. It's actually the wallet app. To access credentials. Okay. Okay, got that logged here. So anything else? Otherwise, we'll move to the scheduling of a new appointment, not dissimilar to where you were just taking us.
I think we're good now.
So great. Okay. So the patient would, um, so this, let's walk through this and then we'll see what's wrong with it. The patient presents the credential to the front desk. The front desk would, and I guess that's the presentation that maybe we don't need to say that they scan separately. I just ungroup this. I'm going to get rid of this guy. Okay. And so this is that identity check thing, right? Like, is this their credential? I think by photo, like the person who I've just looked who scanned their thing, like their face is the line. I think that's the right now a human layer.
So if they're scheduling a new appointment in person, then it would
Yeah,
be
this like,
nice.
requires in person. So far, this sounds in person. Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, if it's in person, then the person at the desk can, look at the picture on file and look up at the person and say, do they match? If you're doing this remotely, then this is where you would require the biometric binding, because then you know the fingerprint or the face that unlocks the app is the same one where you issued the credential before. And so now you know it's the same person. So you could do
Agreed.
remote scheduling, but this particular flow where you're visually checking, that's in person.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably want to double this flow and talk about the remote one. Um, okay, but assuming that this is in person, that's a perfectly good place. So let's just say this is you finished with your doctor, you saw your doctor, you kind of go back to the front desk and they ask you again, sort of like, who are you and what, and you say, oh yeah, they told me Keela Shatskin, date of birth, whatever. And um they say, okay, what do we need to do? I need to schedule an appointment, right? And you might do that again on your sort of like way out the door. So let's assume that that's this pipeline. And so you're going to walk back to the front desk. You're going to do the credential exchange so that you don't have to blurt your identifiable information out again. They're going to say, what do you need? I need to schedule an appointment. Okay. Right. And so you do that identity exchange. They look at you and make sure your picture matches your credential. You go through the things and they schedule the appointment for you. Um, and I think we had talked about that they could send you a note, via your secure connection
Mm-hmm.
about that appointment.
Yep.
We have a placeholder. I'm going to just color this because this is a conversation for maybe another day. That there could be an appointment credential, like a visit appointment credential. also issued at that point. So that when you show up for that appointment, like you can tie out the specific appointment to the person and their appointment credential. Any adjustments on this commentary? Okay, that one's pretty simple. I'm gonna double it and we're gonna talk about remote. Remote. So now the patient is going to, so this is where things get complicated because like there's two ways they could do it, web or phone, right? And so that's a distinction. So do we want to pick one? Web is easier. Phone is the complicated one. Let's do phone. Because phone, can we do phone? How would they exchange? Sorry for my scrolling here. I just want to put this note here about the app. How would you do the credential exchange if you called the office to make an appointment? Would they send you a link you could click on to build the connection?
So if you call in, then if you've already got the full patient credential, then you would also already have, hopefully, a connection that was in place already. And so you could call in on the phone and say, hey, my name is so-and-so, and they bring you up in the patient list and then push a button that says request the credential, and you get the request on your phone. And if the person doesn't get the request, if the connection is dead for some reason, then you could have a different button that says send invitation via email. And so they get a link that says, here's your QR code for scheduling your appointment, please connect. So I think you'd either have a connection or you'd get an invite via email. At some point, we'll build the functionality to do via SMS message, but for now, I think it'd be via email.
Okay, so the patient calls the office. The first question that's not going to be asked, but the decision tree is, do they have a secure connection with the office? In other words, have they had a credential exchange in the past? If the answer to that is yes, we're saying that the office can remotely request cred exchange.
Yep.
And if the answer is no, then we are talking about office sends email. I'm just going to put it here as a placeholder, SMS request to establish connection. Oh, sorry, connection for cred exchange.
Mm-hmm. And then after the invitation gets sent, they connect, and then you'd go to the same box. Office can remotely request credential exchange.
Oh, thank you. Yep. Okay, and then then they do the negotiation of when the appointment, blah, 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 and then it's the same.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed?
Yep.
Wonderful. Look at us being so productive. We need a little work, so bear with me. Okay, fabulous. Any other comments from anybody else? Great. We will clean these up. They're just a helpful aid for us walking through it. Okay, then we go to checking in for an appointment. So this is, you're not a new patient. So you just scheduled that appointment. You've been there, you've scheduled the appointment, let's say by phone, and now 2 days later, you're like walking into the office, right? So the patient, instead of blurting out their identifiable information, is going to go to the front desk and they're going to do a credential exchange. In theory, I think they would like scan a barcode and allow that to happen. So the patient probably is, just to be more clear here, scanning QR to present credential to front desk. We don't flip that around on its head. Whoa, no, no, no. Okay. Then again, they're in person, so the person standing in front of them, the front desk is gonna do that. Do they match? Is this the person? Is this right? And check them in. This isn't quite right. So I'm gonna just bump this out over here for a second. This is what they'll want to do is ask if any information has changed, right? Because there's a possibility, of course, you might get a new address, or maybe you, depending how long it's been since you went to the doctor, you might have gotten married and your last name changed. And so your credential kind of doesn't reflect your accurate information anymore. So there would be a question is, has anything changed? Slash, do you need to update? Do you need an updated credential? Office asks patient, right?
Mhm.
Then maybe they do that, and then the patient's going to get seen.
Right, you get a little decision there that says, has anything changed? Yes, go over to the side box. No, go straight to waiting to be seen.
Exactly. So I'll spare you all me doing that live here. Um, okay, great. And in that case, because it's a replacement, it would be a revoke and then a reissue or new
Yes.
issue. Okay, great. Any other thoughts, comments, concerns about the check-in part? Okay. The next one is the patient is seen by clinical staff. So this one is one I've heard from clinical people I've spoken to about this idea, which is that a patient presents, they check in at the registration office, and then they go to call the person back to be seen by the doctor. And oopsies, there were two people, hey, Keela, we're ready to see you. Like the wrong Keela gets up and goes to the back. And so then this is a problem. And there's also, of course, some purposeful switching that happens if somebody isn't insured or underinsured. They might, go with a friend and then switch who gets seen. So that's a big patient safety issue around contaminating medical records and making sure that we've got the right data for the right people. So knowing that you're calling back and pulling back the right person to be seen by the doctor after they've checked in. So the staff member would call the person back before they bring them back into the room, or when they bring them back into the room, they do another credential check. I'm just gonna get rid of this
This one
extra.
is, this
Yep.
particular credential check is more likely to happen. Like you'd either have, would the staff member have like a mobile device or would they have like a terminal in the appointment room?
It could be either,
Okay.
because your point is either the person is gonna scanning or they're having the patient scan, right?
Yeah. I think that if it's a mobile device or a terminal, either of those devices would be able to present the QR code for the patient to scan. So I think that's okay. I just had to think down that train of thought a little bit for a second.
Okay, they would then do that additional, like, okay, yes, you are you, great, and do what proceed as they would have.
Mhm.
And I don't, if that person leaves the room and then somebody else comes in theory, they can do that as many times as they want. Check, make sure that they've got the right person with them.
Right, that would be based on the sensitivity of the operations being performed, business or procedural rules. They might say, yeah, this is just a physical, it's not a highly sensitive thing, so we don't need to check over and over again. But if you're in pre-op or something, then they're going to check 9 times to make sure they're not, removing the wrong spleen.
Right. Hopefully you didn't get that far into the process. If you're the wrong person. But yes, exactly. Or they're handing you off, okay, they had a doctor see you and now they're going to have a care manager come in and talk to you like it's a different person. They didn't know what you looked like because it's a, it's a different staff person. There's through those handoffs, there might be a need, maybe not, because the back end of the office is sort of physically secure enough that there's no concern, but is open. They can do it as much as they want or as little as they want.
Yep.
Or they walk the patient from over here, being seen by the doctor to the lab to get their blood drawn. The lab could do it again. Are you? Yeah. Okay, great. Here we go. Let's draw the blood.
Mhm.
Okay, wonderful. Then we go, and this is our last one. Wow, we're doing great here. Is the telehealth one, which we've sort of touched on, but we'll dive into. So this assumes that, so there's a couple of assumptions here, and I'll add them to my notes. This assumes that the and this is true, I think, in most cases, but we'll need to tackle this. They were seen. They have a credential. They got identity proofed. This is telehealth after an organization knows the patient. So
Yes.
I'll add that here. Telehealth on a known patient. So they already have a credential.
Mhm.
At that point, they would, the patient would scan. I'll just merge these two into one. Let me get rid of this group because this is going to be a problem. Okay, so the patient would scan QR / present credential to the web UI. And then this is another one where I think they could do this visually, right? Like the provider comes up on the camera, the patient comes up on camera, and the provider, in theory, could see the credential picture to the person picture they're looking at. That's one way. I think, Mike, you were suggesting there's a more technically savvy way to do that.
Right. So the step before presenting the credential would be patient unlocks application using biometrics. And if they are always required to use their biometrics to unlock the application, it means that when they were in the office and they were able to get the credential when they were identity proofed, they had to unlock the app with their biometrics. And then when they go to use the credential again later, they have to unlock the app with the same biometrics. So now you know it's the same person operating the phone.
I'm just gonna, I know this should be one flow, but in the interest of sparing you all, I'm gonna do this over here. So we're saying that they would unlock it with biometrics, they present the credential, and then we connect the patient to the provider. Like, great, you are who you are.
Yep.
And yeah. Okay. All right, excellent. Any other thoughts or comments, opinions on that? Okay. So so I think what we'll do, this is a great first pass. I'm going to clean these up so that it's instead of it describing who's doing what, it's actually like swim lanes
Oh, cool.
of patient. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Mhm.
New person did this. So so we'll add those swim lanes so we can see the interactions kind of handing off back and forth rather than just like linearly this way. And then we'll be able to maybe step through this again in that other format. And Trevor, the goal in getting these in good shape is that we're going to pivot the white paper to talk about these use cases. Is there
Excellent.
anything else? Great. Is there anything else that you anticipate needing or wanting that we
No,
could be preparing for?
my brain is somewhat somewhat focused on a couple of other things right now. Possibly when I dive into this, I will need a clarifying conversation with you.
Okay.
But send me the deck as with the finished deck as soon as you can. And you know, it's when it has my full attention, then I'll be in touch.
Okay. That's fair.
Sorry for not being
That's
completely
okay.
focused on it right now.
No problem. Understandable. So what we'll do, just to sort of lay out for the group, what the plan is depending on how much of this we can tackle offline between now and our next meeting in 2 weeks, we may walk through these again in their corrected, sort of hopefully final layout. We'll make any additional tweaks or commentary that we need to. Parking lot items potentially for Trevor to consider, and then we can step through this with Trevor. So we'll sort of give you, Trevor, at least through the next meeting. We'll probably review these one more time as a group. They may go to you before that, but we'll do a final review at our next mini meeting here.
Yeah,
And
send
then,
send a copy
Yep.
to me before that, so I can
digest.
clarify what I don't understand.
Okay, sounds good. And then potentially that brings us to May. We'd be working through the details potentially of more white paper adjustments and language brainstorming. And I have had some conversations. It's interesting because when we talk about, there's different kinds of patient populations involved in this space, and some of them are like not capable of dealing with mobile devices. So I think we're solving for the technically able community, let's call them, and we'll need to brainstorm how to help the underserved, non-technical, can't hold cell phone population at some point, how they fit into this ecosystem. But this is very exciting, and I know some people have gotten very excited about discussing this problem statement. So I look forward to us getting these workflows in better shape. We have about 10 minutes. Any other comments or strategy we should lay out for the next couple of meetings? Okay,
Nice work on the slides, Keela.
thanks. It's not my handiwork, but happy to have made it happen. Excellent. So we'll talk in 2 weeks. If anybody does have questions or commentary, please feel free to let me know. And I'll give you all 10 minutes back.
Thanks, Keela. That was actually fun.
Yep.
Good. It's supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks,
Right.
guys.
Yeah.
Yep,
Bye.
thanks.